It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, David Baldacci. Hi, David. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you doing?
Doing very well. Thank you very much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. Let's see. Where do you want to start? Usually I start with the author just giving a little backstory, and then we talk about your book that you're promoting. You want to do that?
Sure, absolutely. So this is the latest installment in the Atlee Pine series. She's an FBI agent based in Arizona near the Grand Canyon, and she's been an agent for about 12 years. And she had an emotional trauma in her childhood. Her twin sister Mercy Pine was kidnapped from their house in Georgia, rural Georgia, about 30 years ago, and really destroyed Atlee Pine's life. Nobody ever knew what happened to Mercy Pine, her twin sister. Her parents divorced and then disappeared, and really it's only Atlee left now. And she had a issue at the bureau where this personal trauma interfered in her professional career, and she did something they shouldn't have done with a suspect that she had in custody. And the FBI gave her an ultimatum: figure out your personal problems, get your head straight, get some closure on your sister, or else you're not going to have a career at the FBI. So she's devoted much of her recent time trying to track down what happened to her sister Mercy. In Daylight, there's a lot of revelations in Daylight. And people find out a lot about what happened to Mercy, and also finds out that Pine's life in the past, things that she thought were true and accurate, turned out to be a total fabrication. So she realizes her whole life, basically, since growing up, has been a lie, and that takes an emotional toll on her in this book for sure.
You said this is which number in the series again?
This is the third novel in the Atlee Pine series. Yeah, the first one was Long Road to Mercy, and the second one was A Minute to Midnight, and then this is Daylight.
It says on your bio that your work has been both adapted for film and television.
Yes.
Is it this one, or is it something else?
No, I've had 3 movies made and a television series made based on my novels. And this one, I have another one in development based on my Amos Decker Memory Man series that's in development for a television series as well. We haven't really shot the Atlee Pine series yet, but may do that in the near future.
How many novels have you written altogether?
For adults, 40. This is my 43rd, and I've written 7 novels for younger readers.
Okay, so 50, yeah?
Yes. 50 total.
50 total. How long did it take you to do that?
I published my first novel in 1996. That was Absolute Power. That one was turned into a movie with Clint Eastwood and Gene Hackman. And so I've been writing full-time since then. And for the last probably 13 years, I've written 2 novels a year. One publishes in the spring and one that publishes in November. So, the books after that, they add up pretty quickly.
Was the first one the most difficult one to write?
In a very real sense, they're all difficult to write. I wrote the first one. I was working full-time as a lawyer in D.C. It took me about 3 years to finish that novel because I had another full-time job. But, at the end of the day, every novel is almost like your first novel. You're not really sure, what you're doing, how you're going to do it, and what the story's going to turn out to be. You just kind of, work as hard as you can and bring everything you can to that storytelling at that moment in time and hope for the best. I don't write from formula. There's no tried and true method for how you do this. Every writer approaches it differently. You have to bring inspiration and creativity, but you have to have discipline and diligence and patience to it as well.
Were any of your stories inspired by any cases that you might have dealt with as a lawyer?
Well, certainly I've inhabited my stories with people that I've met along the way as a lawyer in Washington, D.C. I certainly met a lot of interesting types of people, not just D.C., but across the country. My cases kind of took me everywhere. Some of my cases have been based on, real-life events. There was one called The Simple Truth that was based on an article I read, and actually a lawsuit that was filed, not the one that I had any participation in, but one that was filed by the CIA and the Army giving PCP to unsuspecting military members to see what effect it would have on them when they were trying to build a super soldier program. And so the simple truth is sort of based on, what if possibility about, a soldier who was given that and committed a crime and was in prison for it and never knew why he did what he did until the Army, in the Army's way, notified him that, they were apologizing 25 years later for something they had done. So, sometimes, things that I read in the newspaper, things that I might hear, subject matters that might interest me, and I read a lot about, like Amos Decker. He's my memory man. He's a detective. He had a traumatic brain injury when he was playing football and gave him the condition called hyperthymesia, which is perfect recall, which you can get from a TBI or you can be born with it. And I was really interested in the brain. I remember reading a book called Born on a Blue Tuesday by a guy who had synesthesia. He had been born with it, and synesthesia when your sensory pathways are crisscrossed in your brain. So you might see numbers represented in vivid colors, or letters represented in colors, or you might taste things. You might smell things in orange or blue or purple, just because your pathways have been commingled. A lot of talented musicians, they speculate that maybe Beethoven and Mozart had synesthesia. Some current musical people have been diagnosed with it. It gives them more of an enhanced, ability to be creative because their sensory pathways have been commingled. So sometimes things that I read, result in stories.
It sounds like something that LSD might promote as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, there are lots of psychotropic drugs out there that can lead people to do things they otherwise wouldn't do. PCP gives a heightened sense of strength and energy and aggressiveness. And I've heard reports of police officers taking 5 police officers to bring one person down who's on PCP because it's a very aggression-based drugs and gives this aura of invincibility. And I think that's why they thought maybe they could build perfect soldiers out of it, but forgot the step about controlling them once they were under it.
Well, it sounds a little bit like, 2 movies came to mind while you were saying that. One was Jacob's Ladder, and the other one was the Bourne series.
Yeah, that's right, the Bourne series, yeah. Absolutely, Robert Ludlum.
Yeah, it's sort of the combination of trying to create the ultimate machine out of a man. So do you have a particular process? Because it sounds like you're writing a lot or all the time. Do you approach it like, I don't know, I guess for lack of a better analogy, like a 9-to-5 job? I mean, do you just get up in the morning and sit down and say, okay, I'm going to start writing now? Or does something have to kick you and inspire you to get going?
Yeah, I mean, certainly you have to be disciplined about it. I have an office outside the home. I'm in Northern Virginia right now in my office where I have, people who work here with me, a staff that helps with everything outside of the writing picture, with scheduling and travel and business and all that stuff. And while I'm in town, I come to the office if I'm in town. I tend to write wherever I happen to be, plane, trains, and automobiles, and laptops or paper or whatever. When I'm starting a new project, I sort of, flesh out the components of what it's going to be, and I sort of do a research plan. Okay, if I'm going to write about these certain types of elements, what do I need to know about them? And then I'll list those, and I'll go about trying to solve the dilemma of knowing about them. So I will, travel to the places that I write about to the extent that I can, talk to people and do the sorts of occupations or jobs that my characters are going to be doing, read as much as I can on the subject matter. When I'm out traveling to those places, take extensive notes and photographs that may later lead to inspiration, learn about the history of the place. Let's say it's a military facility or a psychiatric hospital or, fill in the blank kind of thing. It sort of allows me to recreate that atmosphere in my novels. And then the rest of it, after the research, then the rest of it is a creative spark, creating the characters, the narratives, the plots, and putting all that together is just sweat equity. You come and you do it every day and you work through it, and some days are good and some days are not so good. And you edit and re-edit and re-edit and re-edit and keep going and trying to make the prose and the plots and the characters as good as they possibly can be over a course of a period of time. And then, once that process is finished and the book is published. So I don't really treat it as a job, even though I bring some of the indicia of a job to it, because I know that this is what I do as an occupation. But if you treat it as a job completely, 100%, then all of a sudden it can turn into a drudge. It's not something you want to do. It becomes something you have to do. And once you do that, if you reach that point, then it's going to be reflected in your prose. Your motivation is going to be reflected in your prose. If you're doing it because you have to do it, your prose is not going to be as good, your character's not as good, the plot's not as good. So you really have to maintain that sort of that childlike wonder of, gee, I get to make a living making crap up. And people read it and enjoy it. And really, embrace that. Embrace the fact that the reason you are where you are is because, you have a vivid imagination, like all kids do. It's only adulthood sometimes that, forces that out of us and puts us into a little box and says, this is who you're going to be until, the end of time. So embrace that, childish wonder, because it really can serve you well as anybody who's involved in the creative process.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Love coffee, huh? But wait a minute. It seems like every time you finish a cup of coffee, you get all of these side effects along with it. Heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, acid reflux. As the world's first and only organic acid-free coffee, Tyler's Coffee is able to provide a healthier option in the solution for more than 100 million individuals who have sensitive stomachs or suffer from acid-related modalities. This is Tyler's acid-free coffee. Coffee without the consequences.
Hi, this is John Morgan, production supervisor for DJC Productions. You're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
How do you maintain that balance, though? Because people that I've interviewed that have become very successful at what they do, be it music or film or writing, it can very easily overwhelm people. I mean, do you have to just sort of delegate a lot of the other work so that you can keep that kind of fresh perspective about it? I mean, is that one way to balance it?
Yeah, I think that I'm good. I'm not a micromanager. I like to know all facets of everything going on around me, but it's not like I micromanage. And the people who I have helping me, I trust them and they do a good job. And if I need to become involved, then I become involved. And if I don't, then I don't. But for me, at the end of the day, the story is the thing that my total focus is on. That's my bailiwick, my jurisdiction, where I need to focus all my creative sources and energies on. If you let yourself get wrapped up in all the other stuff, the business side of it, the movie side of it, and all that, that can be very predominant, and it can take you away from. I always think about what got you here. If you start thinking about everything else other than what got you here, then you're no longer going to be there. So you need to sort of have your priorities set correctly.
Is there any advice that you would give to somebody who was just starting out? These days, a lot of people can self-publish. It's possible to do with the technology that's there, right. And Amazon has all of that. I imagine that when your first one, you didn't go that route, or that wasn't even available, wasn't even an option, right?
Right. I went to the traditional agency route. I sent this manuscript up to the agents, and they all liked it. So I went out and met with agents, and I picked the one who's still my agent today, and a great guy and a great friend, and then sent it out to publishers, and a bunch of publishers wanted it. So we selected, a publisher, and everything went from there. But you're right, self-publishing has changed eons since when I first started out. But as far as advising, first-time writers, I would say, look, understand that it may not be your first endeavor or second or third or fourth that's sold, but it might be your fifth or sixth or 10th. And you have to ask yourself, why do you want to be a writer? And if the answer is, I hate my day job and I want to sell the film rights over the weekend, not a great answer, because it's not going to sustain you through the inevitable gauntlet that you're going to have to go through of submission and rejection, which we've all been through. I would say, as far as finding something you want to write about, the old adage, write what you know, there's truth in that, certainly. And there have been a lot of writers out there who've proven that successful. But I would also add to that, write about something you'd like to know about. And then what you want in your pages and in your prose and your characters and descriptions is passion, some interest, some fascination with the subject matter. And if you have that, then all of a sudden you solve the other problem of, do I want to be doing this or do I have to be doing this? If you're interested in the subject matter, the answer is, I want to be doing this, not that I have to, because I'm interested in it. And everything about you, every sense about you as a storyteller will be heightened because you're interested in the subject matter. And I can't really stress that more strongly. You don't want to run out of gas halfway through. If you're chasing a trend, like, when the Jurassic Park first came out, Michael Crichton, dinosaurs. Oh my God, everybody's writing about dinosaurs. My film agent in Hollywood kept telling me, oh my God, every script coming across my desk has a dinosaur. There's a romantic comedy, and there's a T-Rex running down the hallway in the house, because everybody wanted, those dinosaur dollars. But they had no interest in it, and so their script sucked. And so nobody bought it. And that's the dilemma. So that's why I tell people, find something you're interested in, because you need a full tank of gas to get through this. And a full tank of gas comes from you having a passion about something. I don't care what it is, so long as you have a passion for it, it will make you a better writer.
So have you gotten rejections of things you've done in the past?
Oh, absolutely. I started out as a short story writer, and there's almost no market for that unless your name was John Updike or, Eudora Welty or Truman Capote. And so I got lots of rejections, and some were constructive, some were not, and I kept going. And I started writing screenplays, and got lots of rejections, and got some film scripts optioned. Then my first novel that I finished, that was Absolute Power, and that sold and was a great success. And so novel-wise, I haven't been rejected since that time with novels. But I've also written some other screenplays and that have been rejected by people because, it's just a different world out there, and they don't really care if you're a number one best-selling writer. They just, they want to see the scripts they like to see, and it makes their judgment. So long as you write, you're going to suffer rejection. This is the nature of the beast. It's one of the most subjective businesses in the world. It's one person evaluating someone else's work. And that's what you have to stress. I wouldn't, don't obsess over it. Don't fret when someone, criticizes or turns down something you've written. That's just, it happens to everybody. And the good thing about it is, if you're submitting stuff, it means you're creating stuff and writing stuff, and that's a good thing.
Oh, you mentioned screenplays, and I want to bring that up because I've written a couple of screenplays, and they got some fairly decent reviews. But it's a whole different process to write a screenplay than to write a novel. It's almost like the screenplay is the absence of detail, where the novel you really want to detail as much as possible. Is it difficult for you to switch back and forth to go with one or the other? Or do you just have to kind of...
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah.
You know what I mean,
difficult.
Right? Yeah.
I don't write as many... Oh, I absolutely do. I don't write as many scripts as I used to. But I did find it difficult. It's a totally different mindset because if the novel, I'm putting everything into it, and it's going to be published as is, and everything word is in there, and that's how it's going to stay. With a script, there's going to be a million different people looking at it and a million different opinions, too many cooks in the kitchen sometimes, and a lot of what you wrote and thought was terrific is going to be ripped out and rewritten, and just going to be deemed unworkable. I've been on film sets where you parts of the script you wrote that seemed terrific. The problem was that they had a hurricane that killed 2 days of shooting, and we lost 2 locations we couldn't get back, and all of a sudden you had a hole in the plot, and you had to rewrite a scene to, plug that hole. Or just because of a control factor, when you have too many kids and too many animals in a film set, problems happen. So you got to cut out that. So yeah, it would have been great to have that bear scene, but there's not money in the budget for that, sorry. So you're not going to have the bear. So sometimes your creative spirit runs into these pragmatic issues and obstacles. And 9 times out of 10, the pragmatic issues and obstacles, win the argument because you're talking about money and time. So it's a different mindset. As a novelist, you're the king of the country. As a screenwriter, you're one player in a grand scheme of other players.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. My biggest problem was always fearful of nobody's going to get the story because I feel like I didn't describe it well enough. But that's the whole thing you don't want to do with a screenplay. So when I read it, I know the story in my head, but if I give it to somebody else, they might look at it and go, well, I don't understand it. Because to me, it seems like I was always worried there wasn't enough detail.
Yeah. And you have to remember, too, that regardless of how much detailing you put into the script, particularly on, location and set pieces and all that, I would think that chances are that the dialogue that you've written may be, stuff that may stay, not word for word, but at least in theory. Set pieces are just set pieces. You can write whatever you want in the script, and the people who manage that side of the film process will dictate what actually things are going to look like. So that's kind of just, you can just kind of run a blur over that, but that's going to change. And then, plot devices and machinations and the narrative drive and the sweep of that. A lot of it's going to be determined by, the actors are going to be portraying these roles. Who's going to get more screen time? Who's the bigger name? Who do they want out front and center? And that may change, the plot that you've written just for practical concerns. So it's a million little details that while you're writing the script, you shouldn't be thinking about any of them. But once you turn it in and people accept it and it looks like the movie's going to be made, then those hands are going to press all over those pages, and it's going to change dramatically. You just have to know that going in. It's not a reflection on you being a poor writer or not. It's just the realities of taking something from a page, a piece of paper, and putting it so that they're living, breathing people, bringing it to the world on a big screen on a wall. And it's kind of like taking, a potato and turning it into a flower. It's a different process.
Okay, last question, and then we got to wrap it up. How difficult is it to convert a novel into a screenplay? Like, have you ever done that, taken one of your own?
I have, yes, and it's not easy, that's for sure, because I'd found that many of the things that make a novel worth reading are never going to make it into the movie, because you're talking about expository material, you're talking about interior monologue, you're talking about those subtle effects, the peripheral characters, the characters out on the third and fourth and fifth ring of the story that actually bring interesting nuance. And I can tell you for a fact that producers and directors will look at that and go, well, that's the first stuff to go. I can't do interior monologue. It just doesn't work. Expository material like that might be nice for atmosphere. I can create atmosphere just with the cinematographer and with the scenes we're going to say. So I don't need 12 pages of that. And as far as, making people, talk a certain way, act a certain way, I learned early on that I could give an actor 6 lines of dialogue, and they could say it, and they could say it very well. Or I could give them 1 line of dialogue and then let them act the rest of it. Let them give a look that the camera just hangs on, and that's worth 100 lines of dialogue. So it's a partnership. So as a screenwriter, I learned that you're the writer, they're the actor. Yeah, you're going to write some stuff, but let them do what they do. You brought them in here because they're really talented at what they do. So don't drown them in dialogue. Don't drown them in scene movements. Let them just emote. Let them do what they do. Let the camera linger on them, and let them, through their expressions, say things you couldn't possibly say in enough words. And once I got that, into my head, it became a lot easier to be a screenwriter.
Do you think it would be easier just to hand off your novel to somebody else who had never read it before,
yes.
and then...
Oh, yeah. I've actually done that. I've got 2 of those going right now. So, and they call me up and we talk about it, and they give me their input, and they ask for my input, and I give it. And these days, I'm like, just call me when the movie's coming out or when the Sullivan series is going to premiere, and I'll watch it. And my litmus test is, and it's served me well over a long time, is that people ask, don't you want total control over the project, blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, here's the thing. I never want to have so much control over a film project, such that if it fails, they can blame me, and they will.
Well, that's a good idea. I think that's a good way to be. We do have to wrap this up. Do you have a website that you want to give out people come check you out, check out your work?
Yeah, you can go to davidbaldacci.com. It's pretty easy to remember, and that will link to other websites that I have as well, and Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff, and some of my charitable organizations. So you can find out everything you want about me by going to that website, davidbaldacci.com. All
right, super. Well, David, thanks for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yes.
Best of luck with everything you're doing.
Okay, thank you very much. I enjoyed it.